The question was about, under these current circumstances, especially after all being safeguards and trade cases, how does Turkish industry sees its future? And is there any thoughts about acquiring any assets in Europe for sake of continuation in the European market? And my answer was, there are certain reasons why nobody today is thinking about going into that route, although there were some attempts in the past acquiring some of the European assets. But today, if you compare Turkish and European steel industry, there are certain differences. Number one, the European steel industry is a lot older. If you look at the Turkish steel industry, it's a lot younger and with the latest technology. Number two, cost of operation is a lot cheaper in Turkey compared to Europe. And then number three, and more important, the carbon emission for the Turkish steel industry is a lot lower compared to the European steel industry. So I believe the answer would go the other way around. It would be more or better for European steel producers looking into the assets in Turkey for the sake of their operations in future.
In terms of managing epidemics, this is not the first one that we've seen. We've seen SARS, we've seen Ebola. What do you think companies can do better to avoid such a fallback? Like in China, everything was stopped, and now some steel stocks were just bleeding. What do you think companies can do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's no one correct answer, I would say, but I think that the best thing that entities can do is have contingency planning and response planning for situations such as these. In my presentation, I discussed establishing a risk management framework that was tailored exclusively to financial risk or commodity price risk. But the reality is, risk can take many different shapes and forms: operational risk, compliance risk, and the list goes on, strategic risk, and having plans in place to address these types of events, however unlikely or improbable they may seem at a given point in time, is crucial. So much about disaster recovery and response, business continuity planning, is about preparing for the unexpected, messaging consistently across the organization, top to bottom, bottom to top, and ensuring that everyone is on the same page and understanding what needs to occur in situations where the unlikely happens. So, my very broad and high level answer is, being able to establish a risk management framework to address situations such as these is absolutely crucial.
See, now what we are doing is we are giving the raw material to either China or to Japan and other countries, even Korea, South Korea and all, they are taking. But they are making it a value-added product, and finally they are selling to us. So this is the thing was thought by our ministry for a long time. So recently, last week, even our steel minister made one statement, and they made some draft such that India has to produce value-added steel. That means the special steel we have to do that. So when coronavirus, which was attacking that, at the time there is a thing, India has to gear up, because India, if you see that we are the number 2 in the world. Already last time they made 111 million tons of steel. Now slowly it is increasing, and now our ministry also giving a lot of support to that. And now our aim is in the year 2030 we have to reach around 300 million tons. That is our aim. So we are in the progressing trend. So this is not only when you are making the steel, we want to make a special steel also. So this is the thing. Our Indian government also very much stress on that, to make some value-added steel, so that we also be equal to the other countries, and it will be useful for the other people. So this was the thing we have taken.
Yeah, eventually that will be the fact. I mean, it has been at least 2 to 3 weeks that there has been no transaction concluded. Of course, the mills are still producing or delivering the orders that they have received in December and January. But for another 2 to 3 weeks, if there would be no transaction, I think they will be forced to shut down, at least reduce their capacities. As far as Turkish steel producers, especially on the long product side, are concerned, they've been running almost around 50% of their capacities for the last 2.5 years because of the reasons that I have just mentioned earlier. US was the Turkish rebar producers' main market with almost 1.2 million tons of export per annum. That was the largest import for the US customers. Europe was receiving close to a million. Today, both of which has gone down in total of like 350 to 400,000 tons. But moreover, of course, the local market has crashed, so the local consumption in Turkey on the long products has shrunk almost 35%. So on top of this, what the virus, as I have mentioned, there is a danger that the European ports also might be closed person for certain reasons if it continues developing in such a way, if it doesn't slow down. So that will put also an extra impact. And my guess is definitely in the last coming months, in April and May, we will see less production from the mills in Turkey.
Today, he's the CEO of the company. Ugur will be sharing his thoughts on the Turkish steel market. Over to you, Ugur.
Thank you, Sonia. Hello, everybody. I mean, this is my first experience. That's what I should confess to the first place. I joined it because I think this is going to be our new normal. I wish that I could see more faces on the screen, but anyway, I think we'll get used to it by the time. I'll just briefly mention about what's really happening in Turkey before and after all this has happened about this virus. I mean, Turkish steel industry has been suffering for the last at least 2 to 2.5 years because everything has started when the economy has slowed down, and even we can say define as collapse in middle of 2018, but now it's in the recovery period. And at the same time, we had to battle with the protectionism, especially with US and Europe, both of which are the main markets for the Turkish steel industry. It started in the US, and we were a bit different than the rest of the other exporters because Trump, I guess, had more sympathy towards us, so he doubled the tariffs right in the middle. And then the Europeans, of course, taking this as an excuse, brought this safeguard measures, and being the largest trade partner for Turkey, and as well being part of ECSC, it has impacted us a lot. As a result, last year our production has dropped over 10%. Although we maintain our exports quantities more or less same as a year before, but our internal consumption has gone down almost 25%. So under these circumstances, when we were struggling, we faced another problem. But as I always keep saying, the Turkish steel industry is run by managers who are very well experienced with crisis, because we're living in part of the world where crises never disappear. Being next to Iraq, being next to Syria, being next to Iran, that's always keeps you fit so that you get, ready for anything that might happen the next day. With the virus, up until now, we didn't really felt much. But from now on, I believe that things will start changing dramatically because most of the country is now closing the borders, stopping flights, and taking extra precautions to stop this virus to spread even further. And Europe today is unfortunately the center of the whole world as far as this crisis is concerned. And as I said, being the main destination for Europe, this might have impact or start impacting the production side as far as steel industry is concerned. And I've been hearing some of the mills in Turkey has already made the decision to stop their production tentatively, but tentative still, without knowing how long it's going to take it will have a major impact. This, of course, will also impact the purchasing. As you know, Turkey is the biggest scrap importer in the world with almost 20 million tons of imports per year, purchases from mainly Europe and US. So I believe in the next few weeks, we will see more and more problems arising to the surface that we haven't seen or felt so far. The other question, after the World Health Organization have declared this crisis as pandemic, this might give even an excuse to most of the receivers or the producers to call force majeure. This might have also an extra impact. We are already taking extra measures so that we can continue the business, or for our business continuation, reserving some of the workforce or the employees. And we have mobilized them. Now most of them are basing as home offices, but of course at the mill we're also taking some extra precautions. We're measuring their temperature even before they get into the premises. We have reserved some of them to stay home until we call on duty. So as a result, the impact starts being felt more and more deeply as of now.
To our audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. My name is Craig Haymaker, as Sonia said, and I'll be speaking to you about risk management concerning the steel and metal industries. Of course, risk management is a very broad topic. So for this webinar, my topic will be refined to cover only financial risk management, and more specifically, commodity or metals price risk management as it relates to the impact of the coronavirus. So with that, let's begin on slide 2. So of course, the coronavirus has had a tremendous impact on the financial markets. Sonia, could you help me with slide 2? So the coronavirus has had a tremendous impact on the financial markets, as we all know. Historically low interest rates. The entire U.S. government yield curve was below 1% last week. It's now slightly more upward sloping, as the chart in the upper right corner suggests. There's also been immense stock price volatility. If you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the CBOE volatility index, or VIX index for 10 years, and the price is there. And you can see that in the last month, we've already eclipsed the price from the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis. And then lastly, in the lower left-hand corner, back a slide, you'll see the Dow Jones Industrial Average just 1 year to date, and how we've lost about almost 3,000 points in the last month. So real meaningful volatility there. Moving on to the next slide, of course, metals and commodities across the board have also been affected by the coronavirus. I'm not suggesting that all commodity or even metal asset classes have been adversely affected yet, but you can see in the snapshot that we've taken from the SHFE, or Shanghai Futures Exchange, certainly some metal asset classes have been affected. So here we're showing you copper, aluminum, zinc, and nickel. So, the message here is not one of doom and gloom. It's not about the coming of the apocalypse. No, it's very simply, the all too familiar yet basic concept of market uncertainty. These charts are the visual manifestation of systematic risk and the fundamental unpredictability of markets, and specifically commodity asset pricing. So proceeding to slide 4, it's the question of, well, what do we do about it? Well, Before exploring price risk management, we must begin with a baseline or premise that the entity in question, or your entity, has an orientation that aligns with one or more of these items. So you or your entity presumably has budgets that are lean or inflexible, that your entity has some amount of margin sensitivity, that price predictability and certainty is preferred, and that there is a general desire to insulate and increase enterprise value. These topics, these items, it's important to achieve alignment with, boards of directors, committee members, senior leadership, as much as it is to align these topics with the rank and file in finance, in accounting, procurement, and risk functions as well. So with that, once we've established this premise and this baseline, the next step, if you will, is to establish a framework. And I'll talk you through sort of four basic components of this framework. The first is event identification. The next is risk assessment, then risk response and risk mitigation, and finally, monitoring and reporting of risk. So on slide 5, we'll talk through each of these components, and there's a lot of content to get through here, so I'm going to go through some of this fairly quickly. But in this risk management framework, specifically price risk management, the first thing we do is we identify events. So what could go wrong as we think about achieving our business objectives? What are the events that could derail us and inhibit us from achieving those objectives? And then next, we assess the risk that those events come to fruition, right? We identify the likelihood, right, the probability and impact of those events occurring, and we prioritize accordingly. Each organization is going to have its own risk appetite and its own tolerance for certain impacts, but it's this crucial step in prioritizing risks that is necessary to appropriately respond in these circumstances, especially when we have something like the coronavirus, which is so broad sweeping and impactful across the globe. And next, we respond and mitigate the risk. So we make a decision, I'm sorry, back a slide. Thank you, Sonia. We make a decision to accept, avoid, pursue, or reduce these risks. For this presentation, and particularly with commodity price risk, we're making an implicit decision to address that risk and to mitigate that risk. And then lastly, we'll explore monitoring and reporting of those activities, of the risk mitigation efforts that we undertake, and what the residual risk looks like in relation to the entity's risk appetite. So we'll explore governance, we'll look at risk scorecard, risk and enforcing a risk policy, as well as optimizing financial reporting around this risk management program, specifically related to hedge accounting. So as you look at the right-hand side of the screen, the balance of my part of the presentation, I'll talk about hedging strategy, hedge execution, analysis, and then as mentioned, I'll get into some of the reporting aspects as well. So on to the next slide, we'll talk at a very high level about some commodities price risk strategies that entities undertake. So they'll look specifically to hedge raw material purchases at spot, finished goods sales at spot. This could be on the producer side or the supplier side. In thinking about steel mills as an example. There are also strategies to be undertaken to hedge inventory at lower of cost or market, or in the IFR space at a fair value. And then lastly, firm commitments. So what we mean by firm commitments are hedging fixed price sales or fixed price expenses. So you can see, as you think about supply chain, you either have an innate risk of variability of cash flows on the consumer side or purchase side. On the sales side, or you have firm commitments on the expense or sales side that also need addressing as well.
Over to you, Babraj.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Good morning to my colleagues, my friends from US and Canada, and good evening to my fellow Asian people. Well, first, let me thank the MMSteelClub for giving me an opportunity to share with you about the effect of this virus on iron ore in India. As we all know that iron ore is the main raw material for making steel. The computer we are using, the chair we are sitting, the cars we are driving with, the building we are living in, the cell phone which we are communicating, everything contains iron ore. Iron ore is so present in our everyday lives, and it is practically impossible to imagine a world without this mineral resource. At present, the whole world is affected by the outbreak of the coronavirus. Iron ore shipments to China were affected largely due to port and logistic disruption caused by the coronavirus outbreak in China. India is a major exporter of iron ore, and this has affected its export performance also. The major ports in China were closed on medical emergency. International prices of iron ore and base material has tumbled due to the novel virus outbreak in China. The iron ore's more favorable trend also reversed since the virus outbreak, with prices dropping to 11% to the month of January 20. The iron ore prices were in the seaborne market had climbed significantly high in the month of July 2019, which you all know, on reduced supply following the tailing dam collapse at Vale iron ore mines in Brazil. Having said that, India is exporting the iron ore, I have to give you the statistics of how much we have exported. I'll tell you the figure. In the year 2018, we have exported that 18.8 million tons of iron ore. Out of that, China contributed to 15.11 million tons of iron ore. Iron ore. And in the year of 2019, we exported 32.16 million tons of iron ore. Out of that, China contributed to 24.79 million tons. Now, let me come back to that period where the coronavirus is affected. So now let us take to the month of November 19. So just before that month of that corona came into China. November 19, we have exported this is including pellet as well as iron ore fines. This is 3.46 million tons. And in December, we exported 3.58 million tons. And January, we exported 3.9. But February, it has dropped to 2.65 million tons. If you take about only the iron ore fines, in the month of January, we have exported 2.85 million tons. Out of that, 2.53 million tons is to China. Of course, 0.15 to Japan and other countries. In the month of February, out of 2.05 million tons, we have sent 1.71 million tons to China. You have seen that drop, it has reduced in the month of February. You can see that the downtrend, it is around 28%. So that export of in the month of now, the March, which is going on now, people are all struggling to export all whatever the possible, because in India, this is the financial year ending. So every company wants to register a profit. So the trend which it goes, it is also this month, it may be affecting their initiative, what they are taking. So as per the China steel plant, they are yet to decide their requirement for their orders booked for the month of March and April. And India and Australia are announcing that 14 days quarantine on the vessels coming from China or other virus affected countries. Because of this, the supply side will be disrupted and thus making spot price volatile. This is not a good news for the steel industry. And one more thing is because the China, whatever the effect is, it is not only for the steel, but we are in India, we are getting a lot of spare parts from China. So that industry also affected, it is going to affect the steel industry in India also. In Indian steel prices so far remain less affected. See, this is the 2 months, if you see that the prices which is not that much affected to the situation because of the China. Any supply, excess supply from China due to the slowdown in the Chinese demand may adversely impact global price due to the sizable share of China in the global steel production. Quick, this one I just want to tell you that as per the metal bulletin, the Brazil CFR in China for 65% of iron ore. In the month of December, it was $120, but in the January it is reduced to 109.34, and the February it has come down to 103.67. It is around 11% decrease is there. Then now the problem what we are facing in India. See, now the arranging vessel and transporting are very difficult. The vessels are restricted. See, the vessel, if it is going to China, there will be a problem in that port. As well as, okay, if at all after that, if that same vessel is coming back to India or other place, there is a period of quarantine because they will be checking that one. If at all any problem is there with any of that employee, there is a thing so that vessel will be kept in the high sea. And you know that yesterday the 20 ships are kept in the 10 nautical miles from Vizag port. Vizag is one of that natural port we are having in India where a lot of iron ore is exported. So there the thing is that 20 ships are waiting. So now the thing is that those who have booked that ship for their iron ore, either for the raw material or the finished product, see that thing is, it is all uncertainty when they will get all the things. Now, if you take in India, there is a lot of preparedness is going on to suppress that effect of coronavirus. Though we are having population of around 1.37 billion people are there. At present, that as on today, the record says 162 people are affected by that, and this includes some 25 foreigners also. And government has taken a lot of effort to close that schools and colleges. And in our state, they already declared the mass gatherings also restricted. And most of the software companies are asked to ask their people to work at home so that there won't be mingle with other people. So this is all the thing. And if that coronavirus stopped with this, so a lot of because of the effort, then it is good. If it goes further, then we are going to face a serious problem. So now steel and iron ore industry may run on low production shutdown. See, now the thing is there is one more thing also. Now our government wants to stop some of the companies or some of the offices and all. Suppose if the steel companies are going down, then that is going to be a problem because these are all the things, uncertainties are there. So now the thing is, if you see the impact of the coronavirus, the outbreak will be felt in the global steel industry by at least 2 to 3 years. Now, if you see that Vale, today the message it has come, they have stopped their distribution center in Malaysia. They're starting from this Saturday up to 31st March. And Mittal has already decided to temporarily reduce that production and shut down the several operations of their steel plant in Italy. So the remaining period is all very critical. So the thing is now, as of now, we see the 2 months, we are okay. But what is going to happen from the March onwards, it's all like uncertain. It may affect India more.
I'll be talking to you about the impact of coronavirus on DRI products and steel products in the Middle East and the possible industry scenarios in the wake of the coronavirus. For the uninitiated, it's good to clarify that Middle East consists of 6 countries which are called the GCC. That is Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Oman, and also 3 other countries called Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. And as you know, Iran is a sanctioned country, Iraq banking system is in a poor health, and Yemen is highly unstable. So it's very difficult to talk of future scenarios for these 3 countries. Hence, whatever I say would be more relevant for the GCC, which is the 6 other countries. DRI is, especially gas-based DRI, is a preferred product for making iron ore-based steel in the Middle East. The second most popular product, of course, is scrap. And a rough estimate would be that gas-based DRI production accounts for almost 15 million tons per annum in the GCC alone. There would be additional DRI production in Iran, which comes at a very low price. Of late, of course, because of the US sanctions, the movement has drastically come down. There is no, with the current scenario, I can say there is really not much of impact felt on the availability of iron ore. Gas has always been available in Middle East. And therefore, for the production of DRI, there is no supply side constraint. There are some errors somewhere in terms of ship quarantines or delays, but that is really not going to have any major material impact because most of the supplies are on long-term basis. So how much of the DRI plants will run, what will be the capacity utilization is really a factor which is going to be derived from the demand for steel rather than the supply side constraints. When we look at steel products in the GCC, last year, 2019, GCC accounted for about 17 million tons of steel consumption. The majority of it is long products in the form of either wire rods and rebars and about 1 million tons of structural steel. SOL plays a role in the structural steel market. And of course, we have a 1.7 million ton DRI module. So the economic scenario of the Middle East is, if we look at going forward this year, is basically hit with the oil price crash of $30 per, which is around $30 per barrel. And you are aware most of the economies here are driven by oil revenues. There is also, for several years now, a tight liquidity for manufacturing. And that can slow down government projects, which are the real demand drivers for steel. UAE Expo 2020 construction is over. It is supposed to start now in sometime in second half of this year. And there are no major infrastructure projects really announced in the region, except for a few ones in Saudi Arabia. Demand has been weak for the last 3 years, and banks are generally risk averse on steel sector. The region is trying to move away from oil-based economy, but this is a wrong time to get hit with this coronavirus thing. So with all the other challenges, we have now got this additional problem of the coronavirus, which will divert funds from developmental spending to social spending. And businesses are being directed to close down to implement social distancing requirements. There are also a whole lot of support packages being announced. Bahrain has announced a support package yesterday for about 4.2 billion Bahraini dinars. Saudi Arabia has announced 50 billion riyals. UAE has announced 1.5 billion dirhams. So there is an attempt to help the society overcome the slowdown, which is driven by this virus. The good thing, of course, about Middle East is that the demographics is very young, which the results show generally is not hit too hard by this virus. But despite that, we have 170 cases as of yesterday in Saudi Arabia, 439 in Qatar, 118 in Kuwait, and 157 in Bahrain. However, till now, no human-to-human transfer has been seen, and most of the cases are returnees from Iran. If, of course, this thing keeps going, which is still now under control, it could be a major weight on the medical system. The way we see the impact possible, there can be an effect a little bit on the raw material in terms of, not so much in terms of availability, but indirectly in terms of availability. If China ramps up too much, which it is threatening to, having been ahead of the curve on this coronavirus thing, if it ramps up too much and pulls in too much of iron ore, China consumes about 90% of iron ore, global traded, then it would lead to some problems on the other markets, because we may not be willing to buy at the kind of prices that would be offered. As far as plant is concerned, steel is a large industry, so requires a lot of people to work, good expertise. So in case we start having corona problems with the workforce, it can lead to closure of the plants. We have, as of now, had about 3 cases in our own plant, not really affected by coronavirus, but living in a society where others have been found to have coronavirus, and as a precautionary measure, they have been quarantined in their home. As far as steel chain, supply chain and logistics is concerned, there are a lot of issues as each country tries to protect its citizens from the virus getting imported from somewhere else. And there are blockades in roads and ships, quarantining issues. So human traffic movements are definitely blockaded. So those things can very quickly go out of control in a panic situation. So that's something that we have to be aware of and take care. We do expect that steel consumption would fall down further from what it was last year. It was expected to grow about 2.6% this year in the GCC, but now it may actually go down, because even though we may be able to make the steel, ultimately steel is going to be used at the construction site, which is again mostly labor intensive, and would be under a lot of quarantine issues. So corona will impact the usage of steel. Liquidity is going to be a major problem for our customers, not just because of the overall crash in the steel, but they having to divert the funds for non-value adding activities. So if I look at the emerging scenario for steel in the Middle East, the best case scenario would be if the virus dies out quickly and the societies recover in a short time, maybe. But the time for this, which would have been like a 3-month kind of a window, is past as far as the globe is concerned. So this scenario would have been the best. It would have created less pain, no impact on workmen, and business would have been back to normalcy pretty quickly. Now, the way I see it, we would continue to expect this virus at a peak level for at least the rest of H1. It may keep jumping from one country to the other depending on the efficacy of the social distance, but it would continue to roil the region for at least till June, which is the most optimistic scenario, and then go down for some time before it rises again in the winters, which is a more useful, better temperature for them, for the virus. This is also the scenario of the US president, that he expects it to continue till June. Most Middle East countries are preparing for this scenario based on the way they are coming out with their support packages. And the good thing is that this is the best time to slow down, because this is a traditional time. This is the Ramadan period, where 1 month anyway would have been a period where 1.5 months odd, where businesses generally slow down in the Middle East. So to that extent, it would be a good time to have a slowdown if we have to have. The impact, as I see it, if it can be controlled by the end of June, the overall impact on the business could be in the region of 10 to 15%. Businesses would be bruised, but would still pull through. They would not die. Labor may be sent home for extended breaks, but they would retain the job when they come back at the end of H1. The worst case scenario, of course, is in case the virus extends beyond H1 and starts entering into H2. In that case, we would have a lot of problems. I think the Middle East would face a lot of problems. There would be layoffs, there would be price wars. But as of now, we are not looking at that. That's a very frightening scenario. We hope this will be over by H1. The prices of steel are generally down, or they're starting to look down, move downwards, but it's not yet really at a level where it would lead to closure of plants.